This is the Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1, your love music, love live station, 33 minutes past 6 a.m. on a Monday morning, a money-making Monday morning. And you are listening to a Business Express. This is where we get to talk about business issues, business stories, making the rounds. We bring them to your attention. And of course, we just let you know what exactly is going on tomorrow. So this morning isn't going to be any different whatsoever. Yours truly, Ayokunmi Kujore, right here with you. And we're going to be having a conversation about something really interesting, as I mentioned earlier on. And it's all about education in Nigeria. And this is off the back of a report, an article written by Tech About talking about the 65 million naira bill to educate a Nigerian child. First of all, you can join us. In fact, we need you to join us on this conversation to let us know your thoughts and probably your experiences as well for those who have to pay school fees and keep their kids in school and so on and so forth. This is where we need your input as well. You can join us by sending your messages in on WhatsApp on 0809 444 0981 0809 981. And that is the WhatsApp number. We're also on YouTube streaming live at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Joining me to take a look at this, seriously x-ray the issue. Dr. Aderonke Kujore is joining me. She is a technology consultant. Very good morning to you, Dr. Aderonke. Great to have you on the show.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you to talk about this particular issue. It's a big deal, from a Nigerian perspective. And I saw the article, I saw the numbers, and my head was just doing loops all over the place, just, thinking that, man, what exactly are parents having to deal with, on a regular? And of course, very thoughtful parents who have multiple kids in school at the same time and so on and so forth. But from your perspective, I mean, what would you attribute to the rising cost of education in Nigeria at the moment?
I have to agree with you that it's a very difficult position to have parents, especially in Nigeria, where, the average family has, over two children, sometimes three, four, five, six. It's definitely a difficult position for parents to be in, and especially the fact that they can't, it's consistently rising, right? So it's not something that is, that can be well planned. But I think it's a direct result of a struggling economy. Across the globe, you'll see some inflation. But in Nigeria specifically, there's a rapidly growing wealth disparity. You'll see that the rich are getting ridiculously richer and the poor are getting ridiculously poor. And this gap is what sort of leads us or leaves us in this position where the costs are just astronomical and really unaffordable to the average family.
Hmm. True story. I mean, it's pinching each and every one. And like you said, it seems the rich are getting crazily richer and the poor are getting crazily poor. There seems to be no middle ground whatsoever. In fact, the middle income families are more or less disappearing. You're either rich or you're poor right now. That is the sad state of affairs affecting the world of education as well. Now, I would love to know, I mean, in your view, do you think private education can in Nigeria can compete globally? And I ask that because back then, 30, 40 years ago, public school was the toast of the Nigerian educational system. Everyone wanted their kids to be in public school and so on and so forth. But as things progressed, that became not so attractive anymore. And then private school became, the thing people want to send their kids to private school and so on right now. But do you think private school education in Nigeria actually can compete globally?
It's funny that you asked that question because not much has changed there over the years.
Hmm.
Nigeria continues to compete very well globally. When you think about the quality of education that comes out of some of our private schools, I think it's important to know that we have some private schools that are, for lower income individuals, and we have private schools for the wealthier class. And so when you think about competing globally, those private schools that are targeted towards the upper class or the wealthier group within Nigeria Nigeria are competing very well across the
Okay.
globe. What you'll see is that there are, worldwide or international competitions for, math and different topics and science and things like that. And you always see Nigerian trained Nigerian born students excelling in those competitions. The other way to sort of measure that is oftentimes when you look at international standard exams. Whether it's exams that lead into universities in the UK or into the US or other countries across the globe, you also see Nigerians, Nigerian
Mm,
born and raised children excelling in those exams beyond their peers across the globe. And that's to show you that the quality of education that can come out of Nigeria can be world class and can be stellar. The problem, though, is that that standard is only available to the very wealthy in Nigeria. Um,
right.
yeah.
Okay, interesting thoughts there. Now let's flip the script and have this, balance on both palms of our hands. What is your view or your assessment of the state of public education in Nigeria at this time?
um, I hate to say this, but it's pathetic.
Ouch.
It's gone beyond pathetic at this point. I think it's a question of, do we really have public education that we can boast of? There is, sadly, huge inconsistencies across public education if you look across the country. Maybe some states here and there might be doing well in one or two things, but when you look across the country, it's pathetic. We have unsafe public school buildings, buildings crashing on children. If you remember, what happened in just not too long ago, you
Mm,
have unqualified teachers, teachers that can barely spell. And when I say barely spell, you have teachers that can barely spell at third grade level, teaching children in public schools today. And if they are teaching, you can imagine what comes from the children. You have frequent strikes. Initially there was a time where our strikes really just were at the university tertiary level, and now public schools at all levels are experiencing strikes, which means the children are out of school more than they should be out of school. And we just have an inability to consistently graduate qualified students. It's pathetic. I don't know how else to put it.
Now that is a very, very, should I say, matter of fact, perspective on the matter, and a lot of people actually would agree with you. Now that being said, do you think funding is the number one issue that is facing public schools in Nigeria today, or is there something bigger than just money?
I think funding is part of it, but um, it is not all of it. It is not all of it
Mm,
at all. I think it's a leadership issue. I think good educational leadership should be looking at the state of public education in Nigeria and really calling a state of emergency and making drastic, radical change to solve the problems that we have. I mean, it's not that it's not doable. It's that we haven't paid the attention or looked at it really as a serious issue. When you think about, just even beyond some of the issues that I talked about, when you think about things like, fake credentials and exam malpractice, there's
right,
no
right.
area across, public education in Nigeria where we don't have issues. So I think our leadership is the problem. We need to look at it as a state of emergency and start making radical change. When you think about countries like Burkina Faso that just announced free education across the country from primary through university education. It's not that it's not doable. It's that we don't have that will when it comes to leadership and making changes there aggressively.
Mm. The will just isn't there to do what needs to be done. Not that it's impossible, it actually is, but nobody wants to, or nobody seems to want to get it done. Now, all that being said, I'm going to backtrack a bit here and just ask. I just need to ask this question. Looking at everything going on right now, looking at the cost rising and so on and so forth, how can the average Nigerian out there actually afford to educate their children?
Sadly, the average Nigerian cannot, and that's why you see, the skyrocketing numbers of out of school children. You see skyrocketing numbers of dropouts at different grades through the system. They cannot. When you think about, sort of, the cost of education between 31 and 65 million for one child, and the average family, does not even make that, and they have, maybe three, four, five, six children, there's no way that they can afford it. And I think that's why we need to start looking at alternatives right now if the government will not do what they need to do speedily. I think things like the Nell Fund was a great idea, but it's not sufficient. It doesn't cover the population, the youth population that we have. And until we have something that addresses the funding needs of all our children, we really haven't started to scratch the surface. I think another interesting thing that we need to start thinking about is, the potential for e-learning and homeschooling. If we're not able to get our children into, brick and mortar buildings to get the education that they need, then we need to start looking at creative solutions, and technology does provide that through e-learning and other homeschooling opportunities.
Okay, interesting thoughts there. And as we wrap up the conversation this morning, Dr. Aderonke, what's your overall outlook for education in Nigeria? Do you think the costs are going to continue to rise? Do you think it's going to get any better, any worse? I mean, where do you stand on this?
Sure. I think until there is radical change, the costs will continue to skyrocket, right? Like I mentioned earlier, it's an economic issue, right? Until we can solve the problem with our economy, the costs will continue to rise. That being said, in the short term, as we see, sort of the tariff wars across the globe,
Mm,
that's going to even cause, some additional unrest and instability when it comes to the cost of education. The problem is that when some people are able to afford it, it makes it difficult to sort of manage that cost across the board for everyone. So until we see our leadership coming out and making radical change, eliminating some of the cost of education, making education accessible to all, I think things are not going to get better for a while.
that is such a downer when you think about it. Let me take a message here on WhatsApp. This is from Gilbert Musa. He's in Festac, and he says, on quality of education in public schools, like Dr. Aderonke said, leadership is key. Yakubu Gowon's era offered quality public school education from primary to university level. After he left leadership, we experienced a continuous decline. And by continuous, that is very, very, very apparent. It hasn't stopped yet, and we are where we are at the moment. Unless, like you said, Dr. Kujore, if we don't do certain things, it's not going to change. It's not rocket science at the end of the day. It's not magic. We're not living in the Harry Potter verse when you think about it. Anyways, it's been quite an interesting conversation with you this morning, Dr. Aderonke Kujore. Thank you so much for joining me on Business Express.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Do have yourself a great Monday. And once again, thank you for getting up really early to, be on the show. Absolutely, absolutely appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Have a wonderful one.
And you too. Thank you for being a part of the show this morning. Business Express brought to you by IntoSwitch. Don't go anywhere. The Smooth Breakfast will kick on and continue. Great music is lined up for you as we get to 7:30 and taking a look at the papers on Freshly Pressed.